All right. Hello and welcome to the TechGeek virtual panel discussion on She Leads Women Driving Technology Industry. First of all, I would like to wish all the lovely ladies a very happy Women's Day. In the last few years, the coming together of industry, academia, government to accelerate inclusive participation of women in the workplace has been really encouraging. Today, we are seeing women pursuing long-term careers in technology, driving innovation for the industry. There is wider recognition of the fact that true gender parity is the key to thriving economies and societies. Technology companies are more aware than ever that a diverse workforce and inclusive culture are not just critical to their evolution, but are the driving forces of their growth. With all this in place, the term women in tech isn't limited to coding or developing software. With so many cutting edge technologies being introduced and used in the market, women in tech industry have actively been a part of the technological ecosystem now. Despite the statistical facts on gender bias, unequal pay, distinguished opportunities, women have always been on the top of their games. Today, it's my pleasure to have some of the leading ladies from the tech and the healthcare industry on the forum to discuss their inspirational success stories with us. So let me introduce them to all of you. We have Nandini Sabnagam from Fujitsu, who is the head of service integration, global services lines, hubs, and portfolios. We have Sheena Mohri, who is the Vice President at Dell Digital and APJ CIO leader at Dell Technologies. We have Vidya Dutalaru, who is the Director of Engineering from Uber. We have Geeta Manjunath, who is the founder, CEO, and CTO from Niramai. We have Resha Kokshan, who is the Vice President Healthcare at Barco APAC. We have Rekha Vijay Lakshmi, Senior Vice President Global Client Delivery Emphasis. And Romita Ghosh, who is the founder and CEO of Admirus and iHealth Tech Private Limited. Welcome to the panel, all of you. Thank you so much for being a part of the discussion today. And it's absolutely a pleasure to have all of you on the forum. Thank you so much for being a part of this. So, the normal conversation on a Women's Day has been all about, focusing on the differences and talking about equality at workplaces. This year, we would like to present things a little differently and talk about choices and challenges that have helped each one of us grow exponentially. Because as women leaders, we've chosen to challenge the instincts and be who we are today. So to start with, I will have my first question for Nandini. And Nandini, my first question to you today is that, you've shuffled between the hardware and the software industry from the very beginning. And I would want to know that how was this entire job for you? Was this tough? Was this really easy? How was it, entirely for you? How did it turn out?
So, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to participate in this panel. It's a pleasure being here with such esteemed fellow colleagues from the industry here. So with respect to your question, Sukriti, actually, I don't think it was a conscious thought of whether it was a challenge or it was easy. Just happened naturally in the course of my career progressions. Manufacturing was where I started out my career. And IT space was something I stumbled into fairly early on in my career, and both continue to be areas of interest and passion for me. So I just choose to pick up a role that becomes available, that excites me, and that's how it has been. So was it a challenge? No. Was every step a planned step? No, as well. So I guess you could say that I have been more of a career risk taker. I just go with where my heart is and have just followed my instincts.
Amazing. I'm so glad to have you here, that Nandini. And normally, the person has so many things to share and talk about the challenges, but I'm so glad that you've come through both the entire shuffling part so easily, and it was a conscious decision that you took in your life. Thank you so much for that. I'd move to Sheenam. Sheenam, you were one of those leaders who started your career in the era where the STEM careers weren't very much encouraged for women as per the time. So I would want to know that, since you've been in the industry for such a long time, we have talked about, the ground realities that exist around the biases, the terminology that we talk about as a glass ceiling that exists. After all this, I would want to, help me understand that how can, women techies overcome the self-doubt and confidently work on the instinct of the right decision making, and how have you done it so far?
So I'm going to actually take you back to the time that I first met my husband, right? And it was June of 1993, long back. But he came home and we were discussing some things which were important to us. One of the things that I told him was that I would work till the time I wanted to work. Yeah, you would not tell me when to stop, and you would not tell me if I wanted to stop, you would not tell me that you have to continue. So the decision to work is mine, right? And I think the clarity in thought process was very, very important, that this is my career and I would state it very, very clearly to my partner and ensure that that is clear. Glass ceilings, in my opinion, are in our minds, right? And these are biases that we carry ourselves. Can I do it or can I not do it? Is something that I have to decide, right? If you look at the stages that a woman goes through in her career, you start off, you're fresh, you're young, you're energetic, you do everything that somebody else is doing, who's joined with you. There's really no glass ceiling at that time. When does this glass ceiling actually start to come? It starts to come when you get married. Then you have to think about other things. You have all of the social dilemma around you that you have to face and you have to encounter, and then you start to think, is should I do it, can I do it, those kind of things. Then the next stage comes, you become a mother for the first time, the second time, and suddenly the demands on your time are so high, and the priorities take over. So my advice to women would be, decide every time, at every juncture, at every crossroad, what is important to you, take that priority and then follow that priority happily, right? If you do that happily, life is a zero sum game, it'll come back. Each one of us, I'm sure, on this panel itself, have taken steps back, come forward, steps back, come forward, and ensure that life proceeds ahead and we are all happy about it. Glass ceilings exist, right? But they exist, in my opinion, more in our own minds than in somebody else's minds. Okay. If I put out an application for a director, right? I just put out an application for a director. I had 2 women apply and I had 50 men apply for that position, right? Why? Right? I wanted to hire a woman. I finally did, thankfully for that. But, why do we not hesitate to apply to positions? I just don't understand that, right? So that's, in my opinion, it's here. Break it off is my advice.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Srinam. Vidya, we've moved to you, and I would want to know from you that from being the first employee of your team to leading the entire team now, which is like of more than 70 plus in altogether in Uber, how has been the journey so far? What are the major tech implementations you've worked on so far, and how has been the growth?
Thank you, Sukriti, and thank you to all of the panelists. It's an honor and a pleasure to share the stage with you folks. Happy Women's Day to all of you. Going back to my journey, I joined Uber in August of 2018. This was essentially, and I was the first engineer on the team, primarily to build out a team that would handle our core customer care platform. We call this team Customer Obsession. There was a team already in San Francisco working on a bunch of initiatives related to this particular overall project, but we wanted to hire and really grow the team in Bangalore. So this was, like my esteemed panelists have said, this was a challenge. This was a risk I was taking, in the sense I hadn't necessarily grown teams at that scale before, but I took it on. I took it on because I felt that this would be an opportunity to not just challenge myself and get myself out of the comfort zone, but also really to be able to make an impact to end customers, right? Riders, drivers, eaters, etc. At Uber. So I was very excited about it. So my journey overall has been a phenomenal one. Took a lot of effort, obviously, to drive, building out a full stack team, getting the team evolution goes through stages. You build, you get going, you start to implement. over time, you develop the muscle for execution, you develop the muscle for, then eventually you develop the muscle for innovation. And it's been very rewarding, I would say, to see that journey come through. About 13, 14 months into the role, I actually then took on the global engineering team. This was basically included the team in San Francisco as well, and that has been the next sort of challenge and step that I have taken. So overall, I think it's been a really amazing experience over the last 2.5 years that I've been here. I've worked with extremely talented people who are driven by the mission, and that keeps me going. Right, that keeps me motivated. That keeps me feeling pumped about what we do and what we implement every day. I think in terms of innovations, a lot of really good innovations have actually come out of the Bangalore team specifically. The overall team has delivered phenomenal things, but I'll talk about a couple of things that the Bangalore team has done, maybe because it's a little bit more relevant to the audience. So for example, as delivery picked up pace over the last year, when the ride-sharing business, took a back seat because of all of the pandemic and the lockdowns, the Bangalore team has been driving significant amount of growth as part of the Eats and delivery business globally by actually looking at our overall support contacts and then automating a lot of that, right? Essentially giving customers the ability to resolve whatever issues they might have in an automated fashion without having to rely on human beings, agents to do it, has enabled like better quality of service. We've also done a fair amount of innovation to help our driver partners during this time. Just to ensure their overall safety, because our partner Seva Kendras, where drivers typically used to go to resolve a bunch of issues, were closed. And so we needed to make sure that we provided them the same level of support. And that has led to a lot of virtualization as part of the support. And we've been able to ensure not just the fact that their needs are met, but that is done in a very, very safe manner, right? They're not expected to come physically to a location. So there's been a fair amount of innovation. These are two examples, but yeah, it's been quite a challenge and really a very rewarding experience to be part of this team and this initiative.
Wonderful, wonderful, Vidya. And I'm sure that you're now enjoying the leadership position wherein you have so many people under you and you're guiding them actually and help them do things in a more professional, in a more matured manner and help them in the decision-making part as well. We'd move to Geeta. Geeta, you founded Niramai in 2016 when two of your close family members were diagnosed with cancer. Tell us what made you pursue this combination of healthcare and technology, and how did you come across this whole idea of innovation?
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are listening from. And a very, very happy Wednesday, and it's a pleasure to be part of the panel. And so Pradeep, I've always followed my heart instead of head. That's the problem, or that's the best part of my life. For example, when I was, almost 15 years, quote unquote, experienced in innovation and leading projects which are innovative in Hewlett-Packard Labs, I decided to do my PhD as a side, go back to school after 15 years of work, went back and did my PhD in a completely different topic like AI, which was like not there in my earlier, like when I did my master's. So then again, after about 25 years, I jumped off a very, very, what people call cushy job, at Hewlett-Packard. I was head of data analytics at Xerox for India and also working as a lab director globally. I just said, I'm going to quit, and I jump off the cliff in some sense for doing the startup. All this has been possible for two things, just follow the passion, what you really love the most, go ahead and do it. So particularly in terms of starting off Niramai, yeah, I was heading analytics research at Xerox Research, and with a wonderful team of researchers, mentoring them to do something that's useful to the business, useful to the global business, right? Particularly for the Europe and European market. Basically, Xerox is mostly in there, and also we kind of I had a small budget which was more like exploratory in nature, right? So in this we were trying to do something for the emerging market, like can we come up with some new products for this and so on and so forth. and working with doctors, working with the educationalists to actually bring something in education and several other fields. That's when, as you also pointed out, yes, two of my cousin sisters, a little far, got detected with breast cancer. And that's when I started reading about this disease. Till then, like breast cancer was like, it's not going to come to anybody around me. That's the type of like somebody got, right? That's how it was. Of course, it's a big problem. But when I started reading about it, I was like shocked to see about 600,000 women dying every year for this disease globally. And 90,000 of them right in India. I mean, it was like crazy because every alternate lady who is detected with breast cancer is dying. All because there is no test for early detection. Women really wait till there is a 25 millimeter lump before they come to a doctor. There is no screening program. It was like crazy. And it's not just that my cousin, I lost her when she was just 40. Of course, that kind of troubled me. And that was the trigger to actually read up all of this. I started thinking, as a technologist innovating for the world and so on, what are we doing here, right? I mean, so many women dying, and breast cancer is one of the most curable diseases of all cancers, right? And a person, if detected early, can live for 30, 40, 50 years, healthy living, go back to work, all of that. And here we are losing all of these. So that kind of made me decide that, let's do a small project. So we did a small project, and then I thought we have some new ideas. So basically, just one liner, as an entrepreneur, always you sell your idea. So essentially we measure the temperature variations on the chest and use AI solution that we have developed to detect whether there is an abnormality, where is the abnormality, what is the probability that it is actually malignant, and how often. I mean, you can do that every year because it's completely safe, just measuring the temperature, right? And then it does work on women under 45 years of age, which was a major, major gap in current screening methods. Several other things, affordability, accessibility, and all of that. So then I said, okay, so the last 4 years have been an excellent learning experience every day. I didn't know anything about doing a startup. In fact, I didn't know what an equity means. And it was like crazy. Of course, I was a manager. I knew how to build products and how to manage people a little bit and so on and so forth. I also had a micro MBA, but that only teaches you stuff on the Excel sheet, right? But when you jump off, what are the hot problems on the ground, and you can learn. Just be that confident person. You can do it. If you don't do it, that's what was my thought process. If I don't jump off, nobody's going to solve this breast cancer problem. That's what I thought. I mean, I felt like magnanimous. I'm going to do this, right? It's been extremely challenging every day, going to a doctor and saying, boss, you've been reading about mammography. That's what you read all the, like that. That's not what you want to use. This is what you want to say. Like, what are you mad? You're not even a medical doctor, right? You are telling me. So that's where it started. And I'm so glad now there are hundreds of doctors who are recommending this test. We have done 35,000 screenings in India alone, more than 15 cities offering this, big hospitals like Apollo, HCG, all of them offering our solution. COVID struck, and we said, okay, let's do something about it. So we have started home screening, and so anyone can come to our website, register for screening, and they can. So all this had a lot of learning. What I would say, like to my 2 cents, is follow your heart, right? And women are very good at managing multiple things. I completely agree with many of the points made by the previous panelists. Particularly, of course, we have multiple worlds to manage, right? At home, at office, and in your heart, head, all of that, right? And you need to prioritize different things. I do have 2 kids now, like they're no more called kids, but yeah. So at some point in time, yes, I had to take a 6-month break and all of that, but you can come back, right? So follow your passion, be confident, and don't hesitate to ask for help. You are open to be learning. I mean, you have to be open to learn every day. Everyone will not know everything when you start doing something. It's okay. Go, you can learn on the job and go for it.
That's an amazing initiative, Geeta, I must say. And I'm so glad that, as women, we are standing for each other, and we are actually trying to understand the problems that exist. And we are just there to help each other there and there. Yes, Rekha, you're about to say something.
Oh, no, I was trying to clap.
Okay. Amazing. We all can do that, actually. We all can do that. And this is pretty impressive, Geeta. And all of us, I'm sure, are immensely happy that something of this sort of, on the terms of health, which is one of the most neglected part for a woman's career when it comes to the responsibilities that she addresses. This is one of the most ignored aspects that is never taken care of, actually. So I'm so glad that you're taking this up. All the very best. Moving to Rachel. Rachel, over the course of years, you have held key leadership positions with global healthcare leaders like GE, Abbott, and Becton Dixon. So has your journey been exciting or challenging? How has it been so far?
No problem. It's a very good question, and happy International Women's Day to everyone, and wherever you may be dialing in from. It's a super exciting day, and being involved in such a panel as this is a huge honor. So I started my career as a mechanical engineer, a little bit of an unusual choice as a female, but I really enjoyed, maths and science and what it could potentially do. And as an extension of that, I was excited about what that could do in healthcare. So I specialize in medical devices. And so the power and potential of technology and how it can basically solve healthcare problems was what was so exciting to me. But I was definitely naive. I really thought that it would have been maybe not easier, but definitely as a female, you do stumble across things that I thought would have been, back in the 1950s, right? So things like the pay gap, I do actually know what other people are being paid as, the same as my role back in the day as a mechanical engineer. And when I approached my bosses at the time, I was told that, well, actually, he's got a mortgage and you don't. And that was kind of the reason that was given. And there's so many other stories I can provide. And I'm sure if we, wanted to compare notes with multiple people on the call, we all have stories of those such things. So it was definitely a little bit harder than I thought, but I think there's two things that are probably worth talking about. And the first is, I guess, overall, I had a goal. And the goal still, remains the same. And, that is, wouldn't it be great to lead a medical device company one day? I was so jealous of the people who got to make a decision on, where the company goes, what's the strategy, how does it get there? How do we deploy resources to get there? What's the vision? How do we collaborate to make it happen? How do we bring the technology to patients and do it in a way that's cheaper or more cost effective or can access more people? So I was always jealous of people who are in that position, and that's less, I guess, of following your passion and more focusing on or following people who you're jealous of, I guess, which is a little bit different. But I think one of the messages that I'd like to give to anyone who is on the webinar is, yes, it might be a little bit hard at some points in time, and definitely it was harder than I thought, and I stumbled across things that I thought, wow, I grew up in Australia, right, where I thought things were much more, open in terms of diversity and valuing women and those sorts of things. I thought, gee, things are not what I thought. But in those more difficult times, definitely ask for help. And the places that I found help were never who I expected from. So the people who were perhaps in a leadership role who I thought maybe had that responsibility, or who I reported to, or who were my, supervisors here, there, and everywhere, or were in HR or whatever. I never found it in the places I thought I would. And it was people who, were quite different to my current company or, the places that I would normally look. And so my challenge to everyone is definitely reach far and wide, most unusual of places. And there's some people out there who just champion and see your value when sometimes you don't, and when so many people also don't. And it's hard to sometimes not believe what they're saying. And so the challenge to everyone I have on the call, and then also my fellow panelists, is let's blow up other people's inboxes. All other women on this call and those who are listening, let's ask for help. Let's talk. Let's discuss things. Let's ask for help for those, to our fellow women, right? And then when you're in a position where someone's asking you of help, let's return that favor. So what that does is it creates this background lattice or structure that becomes really strong, that supports all women ongoing, right? And that's how we change, how diversity happens in whatever field that we might be in, because you just never know where you might find help, and passing that favor on is really important. So to answer your question directly, it was harder than I thought, but you can find help in the most unusual of places, and that is what brings you forward and takes you forward to help you pursuing your passions and your goals.
That's a wonderful thought, Rachel. I must say that, very, very few of us actually think, and normally we hesitate to even go and ask for a little favor or even the tiniest of the things at workplaces, right?
So exactly. And so just, again, my inbox is empty on LinkedIn. I wonder how many other people on, this call or, who are listening, if their inbox is empty, let's change that. Let's have the discussions. And when people reach out, please answer, please help with whatever you can.
I'm sure. And I hope once we're done with this discussion, your inbox and others' inbox will also be.
That's the challenge. That's the challenge for everyone on the call.
I'm very certain. Thank you so much for that, Rachel. We'll move to Rekha now. Rekha, prior to moving to US, you were the technical lead at the Indian Space Research Organization for over 10 years, during which you worked on the state-of-the-art telemetry systems for satellite launch vehicles and ground stations. Can you please elaborate on that experience and during that stint, and how was it about? Because that is one section, I should say, which is still underrated for women, right?
Well, actually, when I joined ISRO in 1990, there was a significant number of people. I am a electronics and communication engineer, and I joined the microwave lab there. Prior to that, I had worked a year in SAIL, Steel Authority. That was, I would say, a place where there were very few women. In the steel plant that I worked, there were 2 women engineers. The plant had 7,000 people. So compared to that, when I came to ISRO, it was there was significant number of women, especially in the starting stages. For instance, in the lab that I worked, where it changes in ISRO is as you grow into the higher echelons. However, the climate in ISRO even heard. And there were leaders, Kalam sir used to visit. Kalam sir is the most visible person to say. He used to visit quite a bit, but there were others too. ASR Dev and MSR Dev, others, and Madan Nair sir. A lot of people who used to be visible to us as role models in leadership. For instance, owning your decision is something that ISRO taught me, and which I carry to this day. Sometimes decisions will go wrong. That's okay. You can take risks. You can take decisions as long as you own your successes as well as your failures. In those days, in R&D, it's often, you go wrong. When you go wrong, that's also a learning. And that's the spirit in which research is to be done. That's the spirit in which research is undertaken everywhere. When Geeta talks about entrepreneurship, I think of research. It's the same thing. You're navigating a field where no one has traveled before. The other thing of value that ISRO teaches, which everyone in ISRO carries through, is the power of diverse teams. It's not about gender. There it's more about function. It's all these functions that come together, mechanical, electrical, electronic. Everywhere you see this synchronicity of various people, of diverse groups come together, be voices from different folk, that strengthens the decisions, that strengthens technology. These are lessons that I carry forward, and these are lessons that I think help me in navigate the world. The other thing that I would bring to people again from ISRO is that it's okay if you don't know. You can always learn, because research is progressive elaboration. Every step, as you navigate each step, the next step becomes clear. And then the next step. And you read, you learn, you ask people, you put in different viewpoints, you make mistakes, and you grow. All these are lessons that everyone can learn from ISRO. That's how I would say.
you so much for sharing that, Rekha. I can say that I can firmly say that the changes are there, and on the ground reality, things are actually different from what we normally perceive outside. Being in government organization, as you said, it's all about the functionality and the responsibility and your excellence that you own in terms of the functions that you actually are responsible for. So I'm so glad that things have been so positive for you. Thank you so much for sharing those elements with us. We move to Romita now. Romita, you are a real warrior amongst all of us here, I should say. Tell us about your convictions of being a businesswoman and the age when you actually had that in your mind. How did you carve your way out to lead two tech startups, health tech startups right now?
Yeah, so it was more of destiny that decided that for me, because so when I was 13, I was diagnosed with blood cancer, and the diagnosis itself took 1.5 years, and a very painful process back then, because a lot of drugs, diagnostics weren't available, they were imported. So, and after that, this was a schooling age, and the society was very close. My parents didn't know how to deal with that. So there was this hush hush about everything. And they didn't tell me anything. I found it out. And so there is no transparency between the doctors and parents. I'm having to leave the room while they are discussing. I can't give answers to why I'm not showing up in school. My best friend is all about, you have left me alone. And after that, I start losing hair due to chemotherapy. And then it's just not enough because I have to go for radiation, and that affects my thyroid. So then I have hypothyroidism, and I was a sports person. I wouldn't gain a particular height after that. So I had to leave that game. So on and so forth. But this was a personal struggle. While I was struggling, there was also something parallelly happening. That was, I got exposed to a system that was closed, the healthcare system of India back then, as well as the mental, socio-economic factor which is associated with a terminal disease or diseases like cancer, so on and so forth. So, for example, at such an age, you don't understand why my parents could afford my treatment. I was told that all these people that you see as well, they are not destined to live because they don't have the money to afford that treatment. And I have seen people forking up from all over India to those particular hospitals in Mumbai. So I was pretty lucky because I was based out of Mumbai. My parents had money, and we had connections with best doctors in the world. And as a child, 14-year-old, you don't understand why money has to decide who gets to live and who not. And mind you, all of them have sold their land, properties, staying in a hotel just to get treatment. At times, at a terminal stage, they have to decide, because anyway the person might die, the money would also seep in, whether or not there should be any attempt to go for treatment or not. So these were the scenario I was exposed to versus another girl who was studying in 8th class. So I had seen so much. As a sponge, I was just absorbing. And I thought, if I get to live, I would like to change it. How, why, I don't know. But if not me, who? And as a child, you do not understand, which is a great thing, that there would be challenges that, and nobody tells you you can't, because it's very, very internal. I wouldn't be speaking about it. So with that razor sharp focus and the drive, I just continued. So I thought, okay, I should go to research. So I was the youngest cancer researcher as a student in India, doing research. And then I understood, okay, now we have drugs on papers already, but it's not getting published because the pharma company is not buying. Oh my God, I didn't expect this. So I shifted to industry. Industry had its own problems. So I just kept on going. Had I knew those problems, perhaps I would have not chosen to. But again, the drive was extremely personal, and that had been my purpose. Can I bridge that gap? Can I help those people for whom financials get to determine how long they're going to live? So with that focus, eventually things started falling in place. And the only thing that stayed with me is that you cannot give up. Just because our gender did not show up equally, just like others were saying in the panel, we didn't show up, right? To carve an equality, you have to show up in at least 50%. So because they haven't showed up, it is also our responsibility to show up even more to to adjust that parity and get what we want to. And as a woman, what works in our favor is we know the whys better than men around. And if it is driven by your purpose and why, I don't think why not should be a factor.
I'm so touched by this story, and I'm so glad that this perspective of asking question to yourself and why can't you do it rather than wait for somebody else to do it, right? And once you know that whole healing process comes in, and once you're able to survive, I'm sure you have that encouragement for others also, that you can motivate others and let them be a part of that survival journey as well. Wonderful, Romita. Thank you so much for sharing that, and I'm so glad others are also cheering up for you. We've Srinam, we've Rekha, we've Geeta, all of them are cheering up for you. Thank you so much for sharing that. We just move to the innovation part of our conversation now. I would want to know from each one of you that what are the major technological innovations that each one of us worked on amid the COVID-19 past like almost 1 year. So we'd want to start with you, Srinam, and understand that what have you worked on? What new have you worked on?
In the last 1 year?
Yes.
So a couple of things. One was the entire concept of, of working with, and I'm assuming you're asking about how we've leveraged technology for social good.
Yes.
Right? So, so one was, we created a system where we actually converted a book into a braille language, right? So how do you automate that? So we were working with an NGO called Mitra Jyoti, and we figured out from Mitra Jyoti that for them to convert a small book into something that our visually impaired friends could possibly read takes about 13 to 14 days, and that's a hugely laborious process. How do you do graphs with that and stuff like that? So we created a software, which went through iterations, and now that entire process takes about a day and a half, in which a day is spent actually just validating whether the system has done everything right or not. Right, so that was one of the things that the teams did at Dell Technologies, and they're super, super proud of that. The other is that we created an app called Baglur. That was again with a couple of NGOs, which was really at the time that our workers were migrating back to their villages, right? And to track, whether they were more reaching safely, whether they reached back or not, was something that this app was used. Now we're taking it into phase 2, because now these workers are coming back. So who are the people who are coming back? Are they coming back to safe places? While they are transitioning back, what is the help that they need? How do we position them into jobs that are needed? So really making it an end-to-end life cycle kind of an app. Again, working with about 3 or 4 NGOs. And the last thing that we've just very recently done, and it's in the process of being tested, and we want to put it out, is a navigation system, again, for visually impaired. Right? If you're in a new place, can you, without using stuff like IoT, which is really, really expensive, figure out an app which will read certain things which are kind of pasted on the wall to kind of navigate around. So if you go into a mall, for example, instead of using an IoT to tell you, where the lift is, where the washroom is, how do you go to some other place in the mall, how can you use certain very, very simple navigation techniques through an app is something that we are working on.
Thank you so much for those elements, Shinam. Rachel, we would want to know from you. A lot of decision making has been there amid the COVID-19 pandemic from Barco. Could you please elaborate on those lines?
Yeah, sure, not a problem. So I look after Barco Healthcare for Asia Pacific. And one of our portfolios is about diagnosing radiology images, so CT, X-ray, MRI. And in many cases, X-ray and CT was being used as part of the COVID-19 pandemic because you can really see when the pneumonia starts to hit the lungs on an X-ray or a CT. And in many cases, in the very, very beginning of the pandemic, we didn't have many tests available. So the swab tests that we know today, they were still being developed in the very, very early days. And we didn't understand the progression of the illness as well. So again, X-ray and CT was used to monitor what happens to a COVID-19's lungs over time as part of the development of the illness, and then as part of, getting better, basically. Is there long-term damage there? So I guess two things were done. So the first is for those who didn't necessarily see an increase in images that they needed to read as part of the COVID-19 pandemic, they needed to read in a much more safer environment. So radiologists typically go to the hospital, but necessarily you don't really want to be in the hospital if you don't have to, as part of social distancing. So we worked on technology and deployed that where a radiologist can read any kind of image in the home environment. And typically speaking, the better or the stronger resolution on your medical display, the better, because you can see more detail. And that cannot necessarily be run or viewed on a regular laptop or a regular screen that we, typically know. So we deployed technology that allowed a radiologist to really work from anywhere. And we really saw a, change in, very similar to the rest of us, on where you work. It becomes a more hybrid working environment, for example, where sometimes you might be in the hospital as a radiologist, maybe treating patients, maybe reviewing cases, or you're back home in a socially distanced environment and continuing to do your work there. On the other side, we also really saw a change. Again, I talked about, hybrid workplaces. So in places like Singapore and in Australia, where we're trying to, move back to some kind of a normal. That normal is really looking like something that's hybrid. So people might go into the office for 1 or 2 days a week when they really have to see people in person or to visit customers or whatever that might be. And then the rest of the time working from home. And so, again, as Barco Healthcare, we've leveraged a technology called WeConnect, which basically allows kind of a super powered Zoom, a super powered Microsoft Teams, where you can dynamically interact with people who are physically in the office and physically at home, with things like quizzes, polls, different types of learning. And we've deployed many, even just product demonstrations on that, and just connecting with our customers in that way. So that's been really good to sort of stay connected to, the people who are, across now boundaries because we can't travel. So those are the two types of examples. And the second technology is really cloud-based, which we're still seeing, a real change and an increase in adoption across the region.
Amazing. Thanks for that, Rachel. I'm sure that has helped, several organizations, several hospitals a lot in terms of, knowing the disease well, and especially the scrutiny part. We'd move to Nandini now. Nandini, what are the major things, the innovation part that you've worked on, and what new has it brought to the society altogether?
So in our organization, we worked on offering called as work-life shift, actually. I think Rachel already touched briefly about it. So very similar to that, we put together quickly a suite of solutions for our customers that enable them to migrate their workforces who are primarily office-bound employees to home-based, and eventually it will be your living room is your office, or wherever you set up your phone or your computer is the extension of your office. How do you allow collaboration to happen in this where you're actually missing the face-to-face human connect? How do you substitute that with technology? And so a whole suite of offerings around communication and collaborations, and smart working, like how do you allow people to connect from any device, the amount of shift that organizations have had to make to enable their technology to handle thousands of their employees suddenly moving away from their office networks into remote networks and VPNs has been a huge challenge. So during the pandemic, our organization primarily focused on putting together a whole suite of offerings around what we are calling as work-life shift offerings, which many of our customers have significantly adopted it. We first tested it out for our own selves, 100,000 employees across the world. Pretty much overnight, we had to shift to working out of home offices. And in the IT industry, there are several engagement with customers where you have to work out of designated office spaces, which they call as ODCs, which have a high level of security and specific networking requirements and so on and so forth. So during the pandemic, I think all organizations had to rethink their strategy and to rethink their base requirement of what does security actually mean. What do we need in terms of a secure workspace? What do we need in terms of collaboration? So I have to say that all of our innovations during the last 1 year as an organization has been around that space of allowing the seamless work-life shift. And I think moving forward, I think Rachel also mentioned this, as we are slowly beginning to come back to the offices, both us as well as our customers, it's not going to be 100% back to the office anytime soon. It is going to be hybrid. So then how do you cater for people who are working from home today but would need to go into the office tomorrow? How do they carry their workspace seamlessly from one to the other without losing product
home and your work deadlines at home, especially for women employees? I think that has already been touched upon. I would move to the next question that I have. Rekha, I would want to know from you that, the latest technology, the futuristic technologies that we talk about, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, these are career opportunities that can be equally, explored by men and women both. But give us certain tips onto how, this can be actually used as a magic wand for women in tech, and they can, choose several opportunities, and what are the skills that they can look at?
So we have to view it in two different ways. That is, one is for how women can become valued in this space. Now, if you look at, as a person who hires in this space, I will say that there is a dearth of resources with this skill. Men, women, doesn't really matter. So there is a demand. There is a demand supply gap. So if women can bring up their skills in these areas, there is opportunity waiting for them. And from my perspective, whether it is in AI, machine language, data science, or even just data, there is a skill gap where women can learn and find opportunities. Big data, and hence its analysis of it will provide those opportunities. And I will also say that women are in some ways specially skilled in this area. Let me explain a little bit. Data is data. It's not information. It is meaningful only if you can convert it into insights. While big data does give analytical insights, there is a certain view now that big data has to be coupled with what is called thick data, which is a thin slice of meaningful data, which will give us better insights. Otherwise, the results are not applicable to end or important cases. For this, data with empathy is a movement that is finding popularity. Women can find a role in that. That's one angle of it. The completely different way in which AI and other technologies of this kind will be useful to women is by taking the subjectivity out of decision making. And hence, in hiring, in promoting, there will be, I hope, there will be better data-driven decisions which will give women more opportunity. Lastly, as there is sensitivity around algorithmic bias, where the algorithms themselves are not favorable to women, and there are movements where it is getting fixed. As it gets fixed, data and AI can be used that will provide a rich repertoire of information which can be used in training men and women against implicit bias, unconscious bias, and in semantics that are used in the workspace. Quite a lot of improvements are coming in place based on this. Lastly, somebody mentioned IoT recently. So I would say that AI coupled with IoT, I mean, in wearable devices are pretty common, but not just that. Those will, I hope, aid women in making better and quicker decisions, which take the stress off of decision making at home perhaps, and hence allow them to focus stress-free at work. So in 3 different ways, I do see AI and other technologies aiding women.
That was really helpful, Rekha. Thank you so much for that. We'll move to Geeta. And Geeta, I would want to understand from the health tech care perspective, you're already working on AI. So if you could just help us understand the career opportunities and the kind of research it demands, and what are the skills that one should look at. Could you just elaborate for women in tech and help us understand that?
Sure. So when we talk about AI trying to solve a real problem, it requires multidisciplinary approach and collaboration across, across the board. Some of it were articulated by Rekha well. If you're trying to attack a problem, right, to solve that problem using AI, first of all, it's very, very important to understand the problem. Next, very important to understand the data. And then say, what can I do with, think about what are the useful things that you can do with the data itself. So with all this, and then of course, pick up this problem, pick up this data, make sure, all the sort of the validation across these different attributes are taken care of, which is more semantic in nature, like domain driven in nature, as well as finally, of course, you have to build the models, which are like slightly more mathematical and programmatic kind of skills that are required. And then testing requires a lot of clinical, understanding. You need to write clinical protocols to say whether your model works or not. So there's a lot of collaboration and partnership that is there. Finally, of course, publication. If somebody who is very interested in research, this whole piece becomes much, even clinical research is very, very interesting. Finally, you have to sell it. So there's a business aspect that is coming in, a pricing aspect that is coming in, marketing aspect that's coming in. So it's really, when you say AI, it's not necessarily that small machine learning algorithm that works. Of course, that's very, very critical. And this whole gamut of things is something that a lady can choose based on her own skills, her own liking, her own passion. Just one small, I would say, tip for people who want to work in machine learning alone, right? The core computer science aspect, programming aspects of it. What typically happens is that anyone who programs can now write AI-based solutions, because the API-based programming has now come to AI as well, right? You have Java, Python, even Node.js. You can start doing programs which work with data and generate useful insights. But what I would request is, don't look at these APIs or these program packages as black box. Try to understand what's going on behind the sort of the actual call you're doing. Unless you understand what's happening inside, behind the scene, it becomes very difficult to get actual good performance. Otherwise, it will only be a mediocre machine learning, and it's not going to be comparable to several other data science. So don't hesitate. Go in, pick up a book. Again, like we said, right? Every person is actually learning about AI, and AI itself, the machine learning algorithms itself, is changing so much every day. Like we have deep learning, and now we have even generative adversarial networks where you can actually generate this data and so on and so forth. So every day there is new change that's happening. So if you don't know, that's fine. Pick up a pattern recognition book, start reading. If you don't understand, just ask for help, and then try to go into it. Don't try to shut off like, that's complex. No, it is not complex. Go into it, you'll find it. And there's immense number of videos available on YouTube and other channels, right? Which will make you go through the individual requirements. So I think this is very important. If you want to really solve the problem with the machine learning based, go into it, right? Try to understand a little bit of the math as well. That will help. And rest of the things, it's a huge gamut of skills that are needed, and whichever you like most, you're passionate about, and you feel you're good at, just pick it. Don't worry about even user-centered design. Even that is very, very important. So the overall gamut of things is very, very important.
So I think that start of, kicking start something is very important, Geeta, right? But once you decide that you want to actually explore something, you should just go for it rather than just, pondering upon whether I should go for it.
And there are lots of data sets on the web you can download and start playing with it. Absolutely.
Right, Geeta. Thank you so much for that. Vidya, we'd move to you, and I would want you to help us understand this whole, the part of technology that is being used, and how can women in tech, who's, especially the aspirants, can actually utilize once they are, diving into the industry, and they can explore and master their skills on.
Specifically with respect to AI, or in general.
I would want you to know from machine learning and big data point of view.
Yeah, no, I think it was actually summed up beautifully by both Rekha and Geeta, right? I think the key thing is the one thing I'd like to emphasize on even further beyond what Dr. Geeta was saying is really get to the basics, right? I think today there are a lot of because AI and ML are considered like the buzz words and the buzz sort of technical skills that you can develop. You also see a lot of people wanting to pick those things up, and I think they do that, right? They do that. But for anybody to get to the next level, I think it's really, really important to go back to the basics, because remember, all of these algorithms did not exist, even 10 years ago, right? 15 years ago. It's constantly evolving and constantly changing, and I think more and more algorithms are going to come out. I mean, today we have like significant amount of democratization, right? I mean, we have tool sets available which have all these algorithms readily coded. But you have to understand the knack and the intuition of applying the right problem or trying to solve the right problem with the data, and then being able to extract the right set of data features, for example, to be able to solve that problem. For that comes with practice, that comes with understanding the basics, and I think going back to that enables you to really prepare yourself for the future, right? I think as I take a step back and think and look at the rapid pace of innovation that we've had, over the last several years, and it's only picking up pace. What's evident is what we know today is probably not going to be in vogue tomorrow, right? There's going to be more and more and more advancements and innovation. Just if you look back at the last year, the world faced an unprecedented situation, and we rallied, and there have been so many innovations, right? Similarly, I think what we know today, we really don't know what tomorrow brings. And for women to be, and men, right, to be best prepared to solve these problems in the future, I think keeping an open mind and learning what is there and being prepared to relearn and reskill, again, with an open mind, is probably the key, right? So for that, I think going into the depths and learning from the basics is actually something that's going to really catapult one to success, right? So that's kind of what I would like to summarize with.
Thank you, Vidya. Thank you so much for that. Romita, I have a different question for you, and I would want others also to add their valued inputs here. Tell me about what does the digital future look like for women in tech? What are the several opportunities, the upcoming opportunities, career domains that they can explore?
Sure. So we women have a gift of focus and conceptualization. So which is why we can add a lot of value in AI, ML, DL, and big data, because the way we perceive things and our ability to converge art and science would have a massive impact. So I see femtech really coming big time, which wherein women as a whole and women in tech as a whole can bring a lot of value. Also, it is important to bring out the fact that AI or MLDL, they are not a product in themselves. They are solving a need which was anyway was being solved. We just have to see them as enablers to solve what conventional systems were solving. So they are adding to a system. We have to see the basic functions. So if we don't forget the need, what is the need and how it is to be solved, how can we use tech to better that process? That's the way of seeing it differently than seeing that in a standalone format. So femtech, robotic process automation would be the next big thing, wherein women as a whole can add a lot of value, including architecturing in the AI as well as IoT.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Sriram, your inputs here, please.
I think a lot has already been said, and there is really not too much to be said. But I think I kind of align with the thought process that we bring in a lot of art, right? And STEM really to STEAM, where we bring in the A component of the art to the entire thing, is where we can make a huge amount of difference. The other one is the entire concept of empathy, right? I think with high EI, the empathy quotient that we bring into the analytics of data is something that we need to leverage. We've all heard about the biases that some of the data engines today have, and it's very applicable because of who is writing those engines, right? And therefore managing that becomes a little bit more
there. But some of the great stories that we've heard from other panelists is that we can think and we can dream, and if we spend maybe 5 minutes just by ourselves in some quiet time and think, okay, what do I want the world to look like? What key problems are being faced that what can I do about that potentially that really aligns to my passions? So again, before the inner critic within us starts to kind of attack, no, you can't do that, or no, someone else said women don't belong in technology, or I won't be supported as much as other people. Well, before that kind of kicks in, before that voice starts talking, let's think about what's that overall goal that you want to achieve, and what's your vision. As a business leader, what we look for when it comes to adopting a technology, we look at what is the market? What is the issue that it's trying to solve? Is it affecting a lot of people? And then who would potentially pay for that solution, right? So those are the sorts of things that as a business we look at, and that becomes a business case for taking on that technology. So many of us might become entrepreneurs. Who as an investor would want to take on that technology or solution? These are the sorts of things that they look for. So again, I can only encourage everyone that's listening, don't be afraid to dream and have a vision. And as soon as some sort of critical challenge or whatever comes up, and ignore it. And if you don't have that strength to ignore it anymore, please ask for help, because there's a lot of us who are willing to.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure the audience, would have listened to you, Rachel, and very, very insightful elements that you have shared. Thank you so much for that. Nandini, we'd move to you, and I would want to know from you that the career perspective on what does the digital future exactly looks like for women in tech.
I think all of the panelists have already summarized many of the aspects from a technical standpoint, what to focus on and how to get there. I think the key message I would like to leave is to really focus on the mindset aspect of how do you build yourself technical career, or any career for that matter. Rachel said that there's always this naysayer voice in us, where we feel the imposter, syndrome. Often, I'm sure most of the panelists have had to deal with that multiple times in our careers and in our lives. So the advice that I would like to leave for the audience is that it's not just enough to dream, but it is important to chase after that dream, grasp it, and really pursue it, and focus on this aspect of continuously learning, because paradigms in the world are constantly changing. What we know today, we didn't know a year ago, and our world has changed for good. I'm going to say for good. Our world has changed for good in the last 1 year, and there will be these kind of things that are happening in our environment constantly. So the skill set, the mental skill sets required to be resilient through situations like this or challenges like this and come out shining. I think people need to focus on cultivating that aspect. That is the fundamental of it. It doesn't matter which technical stream you choose to pursue, or what kind of a career path you choose to pursue, but focusing on those fundamentals about your beliefs and your value systems, spending enough time introspecting about it, and investing time in learning and changing. I think that's what I would like to leave as the message for the audience.
Thank you so much. We're in time, and I would want all of you to share your closing remarks for the session. And I would really, really thank each one of you for this wonderful, very motivational and insightful discussion. Can I have the closing remarks from all of you? We'd start with Vidya.
No, thank you so much for this, Sukriti. I think it's been a phenomenal discussion. I have learned so much individually from each of these panelists. It's been really enriching. So thank you. All I'd like to leave with is for folks listening as well, right? Just I think few things that other panelists touched upon. Take risks and be a lifelong learner, right? That'll never go wrong. Be a lifelong learner. Keep jumping to the next challenge when you feel, when your heart tells you it's right. Go for it. Don't think in your head that you can't do it. Just go for it, and you'll often see that that your instincts were right. So so that's what I'd like to leave this with.
Thank you, Ramita.
So in case you have doubts, I would suggest that reflect on the lowest low in your life, and suddenly you would see that everything else is just better than that. So there's no right and wrong, and COVID has shown that whatever was wrong suddenly became the right. So what's your right for you, right for your business? Just stick to that, and eventually that would fit into its place.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Rachel?
Yeah, I think sometimes it can be hard when you're, busy working away as a woman in tech, that there's, maybe some few role models, or you think maybe people, don't make it past, some entry-level roles in tech. But I think what today's panelists have shown is, it is very possible. They might have faced challenges along the way, but it's definitely possible to solve really big problems in society, and bring people along, with that solution and to make a real difference. So I just wanted to outline and say thank you to everyone that's on the panel and for this great opportunity, and happy International Women's Day.
Thank you, Rachel. Same to you. Nandini would have a closing remark from you now.
Yeah, I think like Vidya said, I'm deeply inspired by all of the panelists and their stories and their journeys of how they have gotten here. Thank you for this opportunity, and it's a privilege being part of this panel. My closing remarks to all those listening in would be simply to say, challenge the boundaries that limit you, because the boundaries are first in our minds before they manifest outside. So there are no boundaries. Continue to challenge them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Geeta?
Yeah, again, thanks a lot. It was an excellent panel, an excellent discussion, learning from each other here. 2 cents to the audience. Don't be afraid, right? And follow your heart. And thirdly, with due credits to Sri Ravishankar ji, don't be a football for others' opinions. Just go for it. Don't worry about what others say. All the best.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Rekha?
Yeah, first, truly humbled by this panel. Wonderful to be with all of you. Thank you, Shrukritri, for inviting me. For the audience, I have two things to say, especially for the younger group. Spend some time knowing your purpose. It is worth doing that early in the career to find out what is it that you really want to do. It prevents a lot of wandering in the later stages. It'll make a huge difference. This last 1 year, due to the work from home, it actually has opened up so many avenues for women. Combine software and work from home, and you can become an entrepreneur, a gig worker. You can become anything within the boundaries of your home. Suddenly, so many shackles are removed. So I think that it is the right time for women to enter tech in a big way and to, show the world how much of a difference we can make. So that's my message for the audience.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Rekha. Shinam, your closing remarks?
So I think, like everybody else has said, I have learned immensely here and made some new acquaintances, and hopefully we'll be able to carry on this new cohort of networking that we started out today. Some very powerful stories today. So for people who are not yet inspired, what I would tell them is ask yourself what is inspirational for you, and maybe you will just find that inspiration within yourself, right? And some of the things that I do to myself, when I'm low, or I'm at a stage where I'm a little confused, is ask myself a lot of whys, right? I make myself really more uncomfortable. And out of that discomfort sometimes comes awareness that can be very powerful and can be a game changer for that moment. So are you your biggest critic is a question that I would want to leave everybody with.
Thank you so much for that. I'm overwhelmed with the thoughts and the elements, the insights that each one of you have shared. Thank you so much. It was indeed an inspirational panel discussion, I should say. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your knowledge and experience with each one of us here, with me, with our audience. And I myself have learned so much. Thank you for all the inspirational stories that you've shared from your past and your career. It was wonderful and a pleasure to have each one of you. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone. Happy Women's Day once again. Thank you.
Thank you.